government at work. All right. Before we get started, I have been advised by staff that anyone who wishes to speak at any one of the two public hearings that we're going to conduct this morning, please sign up. We need to know who you are, names, rank, serial number, all that sort of thing. So if you wish to speak, please sign up. All right, this time we need to do the roll call.
Izzo.
Here.
Alish.
Here.
Freitag. Here. Harris.
Here.
Trinier. Here. Weigel.
Here.
Bible.
Here.
We also have Mr. Eustace and Mr. Brooks. You do have a quorum.
Wonderful. All right. At this time, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Freitag, would you do that, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We have minutes to approve from April 1st of 2014. I would entertain a motion. So moved. Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. They are approved. Public comments, we will save those for a little bit later on. We want to get on to old business. We don't have any old business. Staff, we don't have any old business, do we? All right. We will get right into it. The new business, which will be the public hearing. First thing on the agenda for today will be CASA. The chair will entertain a motion to open public hearing to implement a fee of $15 to be placed in a fund for the Court-Appointed Special Advocates Program, otherwise known as CASA, pursuant to 55 of the Illinois Compiled Statutes 5/5, 5-1101, F10. We need a motion. So moved. Second? Second. A vote. All those in favor?
Aye. I need to
Opposed? Well, roll call. Roll call on that, okay.
Izzo.
Yes.
Balish.
Yes.
Freitag. Yes. Harris.
Yes.
Trinier.
Yes.
Weigel.
Yes.
Bible. You
Yes.
are in public hearing.
All right, we are open for a public hearing. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak at this time in favor or against, please feel free to indicate so and we will hear you. Anyone in the audience who wishes to speak at this time, please feel free to indicate. Anyone signed up to speak? Pro or con? No one in the public? Just going once.
I'd like to hear from CASA.
My understanding was that there would be someone.
Read it.
Okay.
She didn't sign up.
All right. Please feel free to step forward. Would you please?
This is CASA. Okay. I came today and would like to answer any or clarify any questions anybody might have on our funding or any questions of the services our program provides.
Mr. Moose.
I know what Johnson's right for Township. But maybe you could just give just a brief what you do. I think a lot of people may not understand what you do. And they are primarily a volunteer organization, a lot of donations, but maybe you can just say a few words about what you do.
The basics of our program is when a child, when there's a perception that a child may be abused or neglected in the Will County community, a CASA volunteer, there's a DCFS investigation, and then if the case comes into court, the juvenile judge would assign a CASA volunteer to advocate for the best interest of these children who have been abused and neglected. And one of the most common things you need to understand for these children is they are innocent victims. They're born into families that may not have the best home life that you and I may have. And so the main purpose of the CASA program is to break the cycle of violence for these children and get them into a safe and permanent home as quickly as possible so that they don't go through the same cycle for another generation. As Mr. Moose pointed out, we receive some money through the 12th Circuit Court, and the rest of it is raised through grants and donations to serve the children. Currently, we serve about 50% of the children in Will County. Our goal is to one day be serving 100%. And in doing that, we save the taxpayers money in Will County because when a CASA volunteer is assigned to those cases, Will County does not need to sign a public defender to represent these children in the juvenile court as their guardian ad litem. So we are a savings to the county in providing the service to the community. Are there any other questions?
And Rita, if you can just comment a little of how this fund will help your agency and what your intentions are for it and your goals.
Our purpose of this, as I mentioned, we already received some funding from the system to support our program, and that's off the top of my head is about 25% of the funds that we raise. But we're looking to not use this money to cover current expenses. We're looking to use this money to grow the program for the future so that we can fill that gap of the other 50% and also knowingly know that Will County is going to continue to grow and that these cases, that our workload today may not be the same 5 years from now. So this funds is intended to bridge that gap so we can serve more children, not support the current program that we're currently running.
All right. Any other questions from the committee? All right, Mr. Tina, you are excused. I thank you very much for your testimony. Any further comments from the public on this matter? All right, seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed?
Roll call.
Yes. Is that public way? Okay.
Hill,
Yes.
Ballant,
Yes.
Freitag, yes. Harris,
Yes.
Trainier,
Yes.
Weigel,
Yes.
and Bible, you are out of public hearing.
All right, we are out of public hearing at this point. Before we take a motion to implement this fee, I am entertaining any further discussion from the committee. I would urge the committee, though, to vote in favor of this fee. I hope that we can have a unanimous vote to go forward to the executive committee this week with it. So, having no further discussion being indicated, the chair will entertain a motion to implement a fee of $15 as set forth in the draft resolution, which each of you should have. That is part of today's agenda.
Second.
All right. Do we have to take roll call on this? All right, then those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so carried. Excellent. We have taken care of this resolution, and I thank the committee for that. I think this is a good thing that we've done today. We will then go on then to the next matter on our agenda, which is that of aerial photography. The chair will entertain a motion to open the public hearing to amend the administrative adjudication ordinance by adding the following language, quote, "The land use department and its personnel are prohibited from using aerial photography to initiate administrative adjudication enforcement proceedings," end quote.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Second, all right. So we have to take a roll call on this, all right?
Izzo,
Yes.
Ballant,
Yes.
Freitag,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Trainier,
Yes.
Weigel,
Yes.
Bible, you are in public hearing.
All right. We are in public hearing now on this particular proposed amendment to the ordinance regarding administrative adjudications. I don't know if we have anyone who signed up to speak, but if anyone is interested in speaking on this matter, pro or con, please feel free to indicate so now, and please feel welcome to come up to the table to speak. Okay, Mr. Joseph, I see you. Please come forward.
Good morning. Just very briefly, good morning. Tom Joseph, I'm the for Three Rivers in the Illinois Association of Realtors. We were the only stakeholders that participated in the discussion on the adjudication outline that I'm familiar with. So we supported two efforts in reference to the outline. One was in reference to the Fourth Amendment to ensure that property owners had the ability to be notified, be noticed that they should sign a consent. if they were to come on their property. The other issue that we addressed was in reference to the citation aspect of the ordinance and how it would be applied. Under the code at the time, there was a 14-day window if you were cited for a violation. And after discussions with both sides of the aisle, it was recommended to us that maybe there be a 21-day window to abate and cure any type of particular citation. It was felt that it would allow the property owner ample time to address their concerns, to try to cure any particular citation that may be applied before it has to go to adjudication. I think most property owners would tell you most of the time they probably want to rectify those issues before it advance to adjudication. And so those were really our two central focus areas. There was some discussion at that time with staff, with the chairman, the executive director of the land use committee, and some other staff as well as the judicial committee chairman, Judicial at the time. And so that went on for about 6 to 8 weeks. And so we were pleasantly pleased when that was accomplished, and so we withdrew any objection. The reason why I just recite this to you, just for the sake of discussion this morning, since you have a public hearing on it, in reference to the aerial photography, and that's why it's important as a county board that you focus as much as you can on the minutia of some of these things sometimes, and I say that respectfully, because as I recall, aerial photography was never a discussion in any of the conversations. And it's possible that I missed it. I'm not saying that I can keep up with every sentence, but I don't recall that conversation ever coming up in the context of the administrative adjudication. And so public policy matters to our organizations, matters to our membership, and so that's why it's important that we focus as much as we can on the micro in these public policy outlines, because once it's passed and once it's on the record, it takes two or 3 years to come back and revisit the issue sometimes just to try to get it right. So we would be in support of the amendment today. And thank you for your time. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Any further comments from the public? Any further comments from the public? Any further comments from the public, pro or con? Okay, seeing nothing, no one interested, the chair is ready to entertain a motion to close the public hearing on aerial photography. So moved. Any seconds?
Second.
Okay, and those in favor, I guess we will take a roll call to indicate those in favor of closing.
Rizzo?
Yes.
Ballard?
Yes.
Freitag? Yes. Harris?
Yes.
Trinier? Yes. Weigel?
Yes.
Bible?
Yes.
You are out of public hearing.
Okay, the public hearing on this issue is closed, and we will now have further discussion amongst the committee, and then we will take a vote on this motion. And I'd like to begin the discussion, but as chair, by stating that I share the author of this proposed ordinance's concern about the invasion of the citizen's privacy, as evidenced by the invasion of privacy that we've seen on the national level when it comes to the National Security Administration. I think we've had a lot of unwarranted and illegal invasion with the monitoring of our emails and telephone conversation, and it is disturbing. However, I also have to add that I think that invasion of privacy by a single rogue federal agency, there's a big stretch from that on the federal level to all the way down here on the county level, and it being engaged in these practices by county government agencies. I don't see evidence of that. And I think that we have to stretch some to find that, notwithstanding the complaints that we've received from the Land Use Department. There might be instances in which there has been overreach by the Land Use Department, but I can't recall any of these accusations involving the use of aerial photography to do that. So I can't say that I can support this type of amendment to our ordinances at this time. if I saw evidence of it, I might be supportive of it, but I have just not seen that so far. And in fact, this could even work against us in being able to head off possible threats to public safety and health. I can imagine there could be conditions on lands where they're shielded from public view in any other way than perhaps aerial photography. And I just don't want to prohibit our use of a very useful tool in order to detect them. So I think I would have to vote no on this particular ordinance today, but I can understand reasonable people to defer on this issue. And Mr. Frisco.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of issues here. One is the invasion of privacy certainly is a concern. And I think the intent of this is just to stop initiation. It doesn't mean we won't use aerial photographers. And unfortunately, this is going to continue to be more and more of an issue. If anybody read the paper this week, the first use of a drone in the area to take aerial photographies happened up on the Motorola property where the building is going up. And the FAA is getting involved, because now we don't even know, does the FAA really control drones or not? Can they be used? There's some dispensation given for this one time. We're going to take pictures as this development comes up. But we know that's going to lead to the next thing that we're going to have to be looking at. So I think it's reasonable as to what's been put forth, is just to say, don't want to invade your privacy to start something. At some point, if there are issues, yes, those photos are going to be used on the line. This is just stopping that initial, and just because there isn't an accident in the intersection doesn't mean you don't put a stop sign up there. It prevents that from happening. So there may have not been any issues come up yet, but because this is so much out of the background, they're talking about these things, it's good to put that little preventative measure in there by saying, let's not initiate.
Well, there was a case, you said there was no cases. Well, I have a lot of cases where aerial photos were used to initiate a code violation. And I didn't go through a whole litany of it. I'll give you one real good example. A gentleman lives in a rural part of a city, and there's a farm at the end of a block and a farm in his backyard, and he had a tractor on the side of his house. His neighbor, who don't like him, calls the county, because that's what most of this stems from, neighbors calling on other neighbors, little vendettas going on and using the government as a tool. But land use comes out and for this tractor, and they end up using the aerials to see that there was a pool that was replaced about 10 years ago. And the reason they could tell it was replaced because it was 4 inches bigger than the prior pool. So he was cited for his pool. Then they cited him for everything that you couldn't see unless you went into the backyard, because of the aerials. There's another case where there was cars that were parked in a guy's land, and I don't know how many acres it was, but it was a real big piece of property. I went out there. He was cited from the aerials because you couldn't even see the cars from anywhere because it was past the horizon. And it was like a true invasion of his privacy. And I go on and on, where this stuff has happened, and I don't want to accuse land use of anything, because they say they don't do it. Some people say they do. There's, it's questionable. I've got evidence that they do. They say that they don't. So I'll just go along with them. So they say they don't. All we're doing is saying, all right, if you don't do it, great. Now it's in writing that you don't do it. And that's the whole purpose of this. Otherwise we're going to end up with a lot more problems, because every time somebody comes to me with that stuff, I guarantee I'll be up at this board and all the rest of them screaming. And it's, and it's the wrong way to do it. Just say you can't do it. They say they don't do it. They say that straight out. So what's wrong with making memorializing what they say that they don't do it?
Okay, I saw the Vice Chair with his hand up, and then Ms. Trainer.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments. One, I support the amendment. And two, I just want to recognize you, Steve. I know you're very passionate about this issue, and I totally understand. And I think that's a good thing. I think you do what's best for your constituents, and I applaud you for that. It's nothing against the land use department. It's just an issue that Steve is very passionate about, and I agree with it. So I support the amendment.
I appreciate Steve's passion also, but just because somebody says something doesn't make it so. And it
I've seen the
clearly
drawings.
is.
I've seen it, Jackie. I've seen the drawings. I've seen the
Let
area
us
photos.
go.
It clearly is one person's word against another, and if I'm accused of a crime, I'm going to vigorously defend myself. I might even, if I think it's in my best interest, possibly stretch the truth just a little bit, especially in a case where, you know, you're talking about your own property. I mean, but as evidenced by your own admission when you were telling the story about the tractor, the land use violation was not initiated by aerial photography. It was initiated by a neighbor calling to complain about a tractor. Our land use department has clearly stated that they do not use aerial photography to initiate a complaint. They use it after they've gotten the complaint. And I, in the interest of small government, would like to see less laws on the books, especially when, if we aren't doing anything wrong, we don't need the law. So I am not in favor of this amendment for that particular reason. We're putting obstacles in the way of our enforcement group unnecessarily. There may come a time at some point in the future when they really do need to use aerial photography for some reason that I can't imagine what it is yet because it hasn't happened, but to initiate a claim. But at this point, they're saying they don't do that. And until they do something like that, then we can look at it and decide whether or not this is something we want or don't want.
Well, you know, maybe
So
we
I'm not in
should,
support
I have
of
an
this
idea.
amendment.
Why don't we make a law that everyone that works for Will County has to have an inspection from land use before they can continue their job?
Mr. Bowles, you have to keep order here, though, and Ms. Trainier was recognized, and then Ms. Freitag has the...
Oh, I'm sorry, who's right there?
Thank you. You know, what this language is saying is that we're not going to initiate. And if land use says they don't initiate, then it's just coinciding with what they're saying. You know, we do have wonderful staff with the land use department, and, you know, I do believe then that they don't initiate. This is just something that, again, going to what Steve says, we're here for our residents, and there's a concern for our residents. We are not putting more laws out there, creating more government and putting more laws on our residents. We're just, it's a policy thing that we're doing. And it's something that us, sitting here at this table as policymakers, we're here to ensure that the procedures and the policy is working appropriately. And I really don't think this is something that is overreaching, and I think this is more of a procedural issue. And if that is what land use is already doing, then we're only coinciding and working with them. So I don't really see what the issue is here.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Freitag just said, but I'd like to just talk about aerial photography in general. Aerial photography in itself could be a useful tool, and it's not to say that aerial photography will not be used, because we do use it. If somebody doesn't allow you on the assessors use it all the time. If somebody doesn't allow you on their property to see if let you measure a building or to see if you change something, they say, fine, we'll look on your property, then they'll look at the aerial photography. And see if you added a pool, or you made a bigger pool, or you added an addition on your house that you might not be able to see from the street. So aerial photography, everybody should understand aerial photography will still be a tool that will be used. This is not going to be a tool that's used to initiate. And I think we should make that clear. I mean, I think everyone should understand, including land use. It doesn't mean land use will not use aerial photography. It just means they're not going to initiate aerial photography. Right. I'm going to support the amendment if this makes it clearer that our intent is not to initiate. But I also want to make it clear that it doesn't mean that we will not use aerial photography when we need to. We might use aerial photography if they don't let us on their property. It's easier getting a warrant through the courts where something might be obvious to back up evidence. And if there's a complaint that somebody doesn't let you on their property, you should understand that means, and then they go to aerial photography, it wasn't initiated, it's for aerial photography. I mean, I once worked with a fellow who was former Air Force intelligence, Army intelligence, and his claim to fame was he was on the team that spotted the missile silos in Cuba. And I said, well, that's interesting work. He said, no, it's not. Can you imagine? You're looking at photos every day to see if there's any changes. Really, I don't think our folks are sitting around looking at photography because it's a boring kind of thing to do, and it's not very productive unless you're, of course, Army intelligence. You have to. So I just want to make it clear that not only to the public but also to our staff, aerial photography is a tool that will still be used when warned. We won't use it to initiate. And when we talk about privacy, you know, is aerial photography an invasion of your privacy? I mean, because they're taking photos all the time. You know, you better shut down Zillow and every other, you know, whatever, Google World. You better shut them all down because they're all doing it. You know, and so I just want to make a point that it's just to initiate, and aerial photography is done all the time, and I think it's, you know, it's questionable whether it's really an invasion of your privacy.
Just because I recognize the vice chair, I'm sorry, dear.
That's all right. I was going to keep talking. Should I see him raising this
Two
hand?
comments. I understand Air Force intelligence, but I think Army intelligence is more. Air Force man. That's what I have to say. I just, Mr. Chairman, I just like to see this committee at least allow this amendment to go to full board.
That's what I'm saying. Okay. Well, I also want to point out that everything Mr. Musa says is correct as far as it goes. However, I want to point out also that the land use committee or land use department could, if it chose, it could circumvent the administrative adjudication process, initiate an investigation because it would be legal for them to do so using aerial photography, and go directly to the courts to enforce the code, which would be a much more expensive process, totally frustrating the whole purpose of having an administrative adjudication process in the first place, and using very limited financial resources in the county, which is the whole purpose of having the administrative adjudication process in the first place, and we don't want them to go there. So this kind of encourages them to do that if we adopt this amendment to the admin adjudication process. So I hope that the members of this committee keep that in mind as well. Mr. Ballinger.
Well, I don't think that just because they can take it to court doesn't mean that they will. But I would assume that they're good people and that they would do the right thing and continue with the adjudication process. And since they say that they don't initiate code violations from that anyway, just like Mr. Musa said, you know, it doesn't say that they can't use it at all. It just says they're not going to initiate any of these violations. You know, and you know, like I said earlier, I'm serious. If that's the case, that the body feels like this isn't an important issue, well then why aren't everybody in this room having their homes inspected by our land use or the city that they live in, and make that a requirement to be in Will County? I mean, if that's how everybody feels, like there's no big problems, every employee gets an inspection. You know, I mean, seriously, you know, and I'm willing to make that motion at maybe not now, but in the future, if things start getting out of hand, going the wrong way, off track, I'm willing to make that motion.
That sounds like fascism.
It sounds like what?
I want to ask a question.
I want to speak out because, you know, my family is Navy. But
God bless them all.
any branch of the service, just a wonderful, wonderful group of doing intelligent things and gathering data on all of our citizens and enemies abroad and enemies within. If you're not breaking the law, you don't have anything to fear.
Right, that's why I said, why would you expect it?
If you are following the county's codes, then whether we use aerial photography or not, you don't have anything to worry about. And if somebody is violating the law and they want to put handcuffs on our staff so that they can't somehow find out about it, I don't think that we should participate in that. it would be taking away a tool, granted one that they claim they are not using, but it's available to our departments at this point to use as an investigation tool. I don't see any reason to take something away from them if our concern is the health and safety of our residents. And I wish that property inspections were the law and that, that was just a part of things. Because when I purchased my home 5 years ago, I paid for an inspector to inspect my house. And despite the fact that I actually paid for this service, there were things wrong with the house that he did not uncover. So, if there's anything we can do to help protect residents in our county, I think we should be acting in that way. And to take a tool away from our land use department that may at some point in the future provide for the health and safety of a resident, I just think that's a mistake, and I will not be supporting the change to that.
Mr. Speaker, your question.
Yeah, my question, I know we're still in public hearing, but what I wanted to know, we're out? Okay. Oh, okay. My question, I know, Steve, you have brought the 2 cases up that occurred in your district, really that kind of propelled this amendment in the first place. And I guess my concern is, aside from this amendment, if those 2 cases have been addressed, I remember you talking about this a long time ago, and I hope we can come to some resolution. I remember getting an email from you and Kurt about those 2 cases, but have those 2 families had any resolution, any problem solved?
They complied with what land use wanted, otherwise, let's put it like this. If the neighbor didn't call about the tractor, no one would care about the pool, and no one would have cared about the other stuff. And land use wouldn't have known about it. And I'm not saying it's right to do things wrong and leave it wrong, but that's why I made that statement, and it's a true statement. If we don't think there's a problem, like Jackie says, my house is all good, let land use come get it. Fine, then why not make it that everybody, in order to work here, does that? Land use comes out, inspects your house. You'd have a cry from the employees like you wouldn't believe. People want, any time land use comes out to any home, even if it's brand new, they're able, if they want, to find something wrong. There's always going to be something wrong.
Okay, and I do recommend, along with the chairman, that you as a committee do vote your conscience on the issue, send it to the executive board and the county board as a whole, and let everybody make it. Because I think everybody has a very valid point on this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome, Ms. Lewis.
Yeah, I'd just like to make one other comment in relation to what's an initiation of aerial photography. Just to make it clear, the county agency will not initiate the complaint to aerial photography. And the reason I'm mentioning this is assessors use this all the time. Because people live on the property, they put an addition on. And then, of course, what the assessors do is they pick up the phone and call the permitting agency and say, did you issue a permit for this and not send it to us? Because with the land use department or the villages, they send the permits to the assessor to let them know that they're putting an addition on. Okay. So assessors initiate things by aerial photography all the time. So if they call the land use department, is that an initiation of aerial photography? I would say no, because we don't do it. But it actually was initiated from aerial photography.
Mr. Weigel had a question.
I wonder if the land use department has a comment on it, and if the building division might use it for some reason. It might be a conflict for what we're trying to do. Is there any comment from the land use department? 2 or 4 on this issue?
I'd be happy to comment on any specific question or concern that you might have. Are you asking me to comment generally on the motion?
Yeah. Do you feel this would have a big impact on you or not have an impact?
Well, I think the impact that it would have is that its passage, I believe, would suggest to people that there has been abuse. That you don't take a step like this unless you feel that there is a problem that needs to be solved. First place, we have been told repeatedly, you have been told repeatedly, through the state's attorney's office, that there's a long-established set of U.S. Supreme Court cases complemented by Illinois Supreme Court cases and other statutory law that suggests that from a legal standpoint, there is no Fourth Amendment abridgment by the use of aerial photography. There simply isn't. So if you enact a piece of legislation in order to correct a problem, you first have to identify what the problem is. The problem could be that there's a legal abuse of Fourth Amendment rights. Our courts have told us that there is not. The second thing that's been suggested is that somehow this is a frequent and extensive practice. If you look at the 289 cases that the Law Department has adjudicated through AA, there have only been barely 1% that involved aerial photography as the initiating element. So you can do the math. That's a couple of cases. So the point is that, also as the chairman said, is that the fundamental purpose of setting up AA was to divert simple cases from the courts where they were incurring costs not only for the county, but tremendous cost in terms of time and money for the individual who allegedly had violated a particular ordinance. So I think the practical effect of the adoption of this particular motion will be, as Mr. Bible pointed out, to divert cases back to the court where people will experience delays, time, and expense, and it will be addressing a situation that has very little practical meaning inasmuch as it can go to the court. Further, little practical meaning in that the extent of the practice has been extremely limited, and perhaps most importantly, we would be substituting our legal judgment for that of the courts at the federal and state level.
Yeah, I'm confused because you immediately told us you don't use aerial photography to initiate a case, but then you just said of the 289 cases, 1% of them were initiated by aerial photography. So, do you use it or don't use it?
Well, I think the conversation has always been about whether we initiate cases with aerial photography, whether we sit in the back room and say, let's see if there's any unregistered pools in Green Garden Township today, and then somehow scan the GIS system to find a case, and then if we find a case, we then initiate the enforcement effort. We do not do that. There have been cases, as I just mentioned, and these aren't cases that are suggested or referred to in general. This is an actual objective reading of the records of administrative adjudication about not what people say has happened, but what has actually happened. There has been, as I mentioned, only that number of cases where they were not initiated. They were not initiated by the aerial photography in the sense that there was no citizen complaint and we just happened to look at a particular photograph and said, aha, violation. Rather, there was a complaint, but in connection with pursuing that case after the individual was given the time to comply, as Mr. Joseph has pointed out, provisions of AA provide an extensive period of time that a person can come into compliance, that if they have not come into compliance, then and only then did we file the matter with AA, and there have been a couple of instances where the precipitating event was aerial photography in terms of the evidence that was used, but the initiation of the case in all instances resulted from a citizen complaint.
Mr. Paddock, you say that this amendment has little practical meaning, but I sit here today after listening to my constituents that don't feel that this procedure is fair, and again, we're talking about policy and procedure. So I'm going to tell you that there is meaning here. I'm sitting here represent my constituents, and earlier I stated that I believe that the way you and your department is working is correct. But this amendment is not taking away that procedure, the use of aerial photography. It's just the initiation. So I'm sorry, but I have to argue that there is meaning here. And the people that are in support of this amendment, we are standing up for our constituents and our residents that do have an issue with this procedure.
I want to give that to Tom a question, because I don't think we're heard it or had an opportunity to understand it in some way, because I didn't get the answer. Do you use aerial photography at all as it pertains to like building permits? Is that what you were getting at, Tom?
Well, say somebody's building property or something like that, to see if they're in compliance with the building code. I don't know.
Do you do anything like that?
No. Our chief building official is here, and he can comment if I don't cover it. That's really an on-the-ground type of thing. You can't see whether there's proper conduit or proper wiring or proper joists from aerial photography. The types of situations that it really, could reveal tend to have to do more with adherence to zoning provisions, proper setback. Now, where it would impact the building code is the fundamental question of, did they obtain a permit? As was mentioned in the assessment procedure, if you build a structure and you are able to look at the time series photography that the county board has authorized and paid for, if you look at that time series photography and at one point in time that building was not there, is there, that would suggest to a reasonable person, why don't we go down and determine whether a permit was drawn for that. If a permit was not drawn, that's clearly a violation of a central tenet of the building code, that to build a structure of a certain type in Bill County, you gotta have a permit.
And under Mr. Moose's scenario that you heard from the assessor's office and they got their evidence from aerial photography, would that prohibit you from initiating a complaint?
Mr. Mayor, I was distracted.
No, that's okay. Jim was saying that, what if the assessor's office saw the building that suddenly appeared, or the rec room that suddenly appeared, or pool, and they notified your office and asked you if there was a permit for that?
Yeah, well, that's a rather common occurrence.
Okay, so
not so much from our supervisor of assessments, but rather a township supervisor will call us up and something, they're very close to the people. They're close to what's going on in their community. And they drive it and they see it and they say, I don't think I saw that pole barn before. And I don't remember seeing a permit posted when it was being erected. Let's call land use and see if there was a permit drawn. Now, I'm not suggesting whatsoever that the first step is, let's go to the aerial photography. Generally speaking, the person would then drive out to it and say, yeah, there's a barn there, don't see a permit. But if that needed to be augmented or clarified or put into context, that visual observation from ground level, from the public right-of-way, might be verified by examining the county's GIS aerial photography.
Kurt, the assessors themselves will identify things through aerial photography.
Absolutely.
And they will call.
Yeah, they will. So the question is, would that constitute initiating a case?
Yes.
If the area, it's only land use that's being prohibited from doing it. Right. But if it was a township assessor that observed aerial photography, the same database that we use, the GIS, and referred the case to us, is that somehow problematic in as much as they were initiating a case in that instance through reference to aerial photography?
Okay, at this point, I have to act as a timekeeper as well. I certainly want to recognize our Assistant State's Attorney, but we've all made very good points here, but for the sake of time, we do have one other very important item to get to before we adjourn this meeting. I want to take 3 more comments, inclusive of the Assistant State's Attorney, on this particular issue. We have to take a vote. We also have a DOJ grant we have to dispense with. So, having said that, I want to recognize Ms. Tatro.
Okay, just listening to the entire conversation and reading through the verbiage, it sounds to me like there's a little confusion about what is being initiated, whether it's the administrative adjudication enforcement proceedings, which could be interpreted to be the actual filing of the complaint, or whether the intent of the committee is the initiation of the ordinance violation investigation. And it may be that this could be cleaned up, if it is your will, that the initiation of the ordinance violation investigation is what you want to prohibit, not the actual filing of the complaint with the administrative adjudication process. And with regard to Mr. Paddock's question, I don't think this would prohibit an investigation based on a report by a township supervisor, because the verbiage is land use department and its personnel are permitted. It doesn't prohibit, and I don't think you'd have the authority to prohibit a township assessor over whom the county has no control.
Right.
Right. I know there are more than two hands before Pedro's vote, but I am willing to hear two more people, and then I think we should put this to a vote.
Right.
Comments? No?
Based on City Attorney Pedro's comments, is it clear that this amendment clearly states that it's the initiation of the violation that you're doing and not using aerial photography? It sounds like Mary's saying it's not really clear. You're suggesting, Mary, that
Well,
we take that
it was my understanding, and I'm not sure, my understanding that you didn't want them to start an investigation based on aerial photography. So you didn't want the situation where land use personnel are sitting there scanning photographs and comparing, 2 years ago with this year's and saying, oh, there was not a pool 2 years ago, there is one this year, we don't have any permit.
That's my understanding. I'll read it again. The Land Use Department and its personnel are prohibited from using aerial photography to initiate administrative adjudication enforcement proceedings.
So
that should be initiated
We were talking about initiating investigations, so that's different language.
It's different language. That's what I'm pointing out. You might want to change the language.
Yeah.
Because the intent is not to initiate the complaint. Not you can't use it at adjudication.
Right. You're absolutely right, Mr. Mooses. I don't know how that language got changed, but we were talking about, I believe that was your intention,
Yeah, you know
Mr.
what?
Ballard.
I'm going to make a motion that we use the exact language we have here, but right after initiate, we put down investigations.
Okay, so do you want to strike the language initiate
Strike the
administrative
language
adjudication?
and just add the word investigations after initiate.
I would ask the state's attorney perhaps to give us the language.
One of the problems here, we reworded this thing 15 times. Every time we had a meeting, we had a different language.
Yeah, but my understanding was we didn't want to initiate an investigation.
Right, so if we add the word investigation, that fixes it.
Perhaps what we should be doing is to place this on the table and change the language. No. Do we want to do that?
Do it here.
Do we want to do it here?
And I will
Change it after a couple
If
of years.
it's initiating the actual investigation, and then, in other words, initiating a complaint through land use itself is what you're trying to prohibit. So land use is not generating the complaint internally.
Mr. Trenier just made a good procedural point. We just had a public hearing in which we used this language, adjudication enforcement procedure.
Yeah, but from that
That's what
public
you
hearing
can't
is the information, it does not invalidate the public hearing.
Okay.
You're still fine. The point of public hearings is that you gather information
Based on the
to
public
make
hearing.
changes, and then you make the appropriate changes.
Right.
Okay. So staff, advise me, what am I supposed to do here? We're going to change the language?
Somebody needs to provide language desired.
I just did.
I'm not so sure, I want to hear from the state's attorney's office as to the language she's comfortable with.
I would suggest that they are prohibited from using aerial photography to initiate an internal land use complaint of an ordination violation. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you, Kurt? And I'm going to turn to you to make sure that because you guys are going to use it. Does that make sense to you, or does an investigation make more sense?
I really don't want to comment on this.
What was it again, Mary?
We'll need to have.
What was it? You got it.
So now you need a motion to substitute that language for.
Okay, we'll need to have the question restated.
The Land Use Department and its personnel are prohibited from using aerial photography to initiate an internal land use complaint that would lead to an ordinance violation investigation.
Internal land use complaint by the board.
Okay.
Investigation.
No, we don't need investigation.
Say the land use department and its personnel are prohibited from using aerial photography to initiate an internal land use complaint of an ordinance violation. Period.
I agree.
Everyone heard that?
Steve.
Everyone heard that?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
All right, we have the question, we have a move, we have a second. We're going to do a roll call on this?
That was to amend the language.
To amend this language?
Approve the amendment, then vote on the motion.
This would be a roll call, right?
Yes.
All right.
Izzo?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Freitag?
Yes.
Harris?
No.
Rainier?
Yes.
Weigel? Bible?
Yes.
And Mr. Richards, would you care to vote? Motion carries.
Okay, having passed the amendment to the proposed amendment to the adjudications, administration adjudications ordinance, we are now entertaining a motion to pass the amended proposal. So moved. Second?
Second.
All right. We'll do a roll call vote. on this.
Izzo?
Yes.
Allen?
Yes.
Freitag?
Yes.
Harris?
No.
Rainier?
No.
Weigel?
No.
Bible?
No.
Mr. Mustis, would you care to vote?
You know, I didn't vote, but I'm not so sure my vote, so I don't think I'm only able to vote really to break the time. But I would vote yes, but my vote counts. My vote counts, I would vote yes.
No.
The motion please.
Motion fails?
I have 4 no's and 3 yeses. Okay, did not.
All right. I want to thank the members of this committee because I think you did a very good job today. You all made fantastic comments and discussions. This is what democracy is about, folks, and I'm really proud of all of you, whether you were for or against this. So I think it's fantastic. We need to move on now to this very important Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program, and for that I'm recognizing Mr. Nick Palmer to discuss or to explain this grant. This is a regular thing that we do every year. It means about $40,000 to this county. So without further ado, Mr. Palmer.
Okay, I'll try to keep this very short this week. You have several documents in your packet, probably more than you want to know about the JAG grant. You have the solicitation, the allocations for all the communities in Illinois, and the FAQs. Put it all in there just in case you're interested. This is an annual grant that we get. It's a formula grant. It's a very complex formula that deals with crime rates. We are a disparate partner with the City of Joliet, which means there's an allocation for City of Joliet, allocation for us. Ours is usually much lower, but several years back, the former Judicial Chair and I negotiated with former City Manager John Mesra to split with the City and the county. We continue to push for that because we do a lot of work with the City of Joliet, and so that is our proposal to them, which we expect that to be the case. So this year's amount would end up being $29,106, which isn't a huge amount of money, but it does help with costs that we don't have the funds for. Previously, last year we did an expansion of our heroin education program. We're still rolling that out in the Valley View School District up in Bolingbrook and Romeoville. Years before, we done cameras for the Sheriff's Department, eye-wings for the Sheriff's Department. Many years ago, we did some dollars for the drug court. Now they have their own funding source. The proposal we have, and we don't have it for you today, we're going to bring that back next month, but we are hoping to continue our heroin efforts. There has been an effort that's kind of being led in DuPage County with a Narcan program, which is a overdose kind of drug that saves lives, gets people who have overdosed to the hospital so they can be hopefully resuscitated and into treatment programs. We have made heroin obviously a major issue at the time. Combined effort of our health department, our state's attorney, coroner, county executive, board members have been involved. So we think this is a good use of funds. We have a budget from the health department that is approximately $45,000 to $50,000 estimated to run this program, because there is an accountability of tracking all the stuff and administering the program. So we're going to use the $29,000 towards that. We're trying to leverage other dollars either from the health department or some of our police department. So we're still working out those details. What's required for this grant very simply is we need to do the MOU, which I did hand out to you, a draft MOU. That's the same MOU we've used for years. It's a DOJ approved MOU, and the state's attorney has previously reviewed that, but they review it again. Just says we're splitting the money 50-50. I'm asking you to approve that today. And then next month we will bring back the narrative on all the accompanying documents. We will bring that to this committee, hopefully get approval out of this committee and send it to the full board. But because of the deadline, and this is how it always is, it doesn't work with our schedules, we will submit the application after this committee, but before the board meeting. And as in the past, we've had to do the board concurs with the committee approval recommendation. If for some reason the board would reject it, we can always go back and amend the document. And the last thing I'll just mention is there is a review process. So once we distribute the draft narrative to you as board members, we will post this on our website, make it available, and schedule a public hearing at the next judicial committee meeting so that the public can comment if they think we should be spending on something else. That's their opportunity, and they're also able to submit comments, and that'll all be posted on our website. So really what I need from you today is just, if you would, approval of the draft MOU. I will work with the city of Joliet. They have that also, and we will hopefully concur both bodies and approve that, and then we do a joint application with them instead. So.
Okay, Nick, thank you. It's boilerplate MOU, same as last year.
It's the same. The only thing that's changed is the date and the amounts, and then it's a standard IGA that we are required to do that just spells out for everybody that we're splitting money 50-50, and that the county will be the administrator of the grant.
It's going to be used for heroin education.
And our intent at this, unless something changes, we're trying to get 100% confirmation from DOJ, but we believe this is fall under their drug treatment enforcement programs provision of this grant that can be used as part of this budget that's been spelled out by the health department.
Any other questions? Right there.
I'm definitely in support of this. I know you had mentioned that, not necessarily some of these funds go to drug court. I'd like that to be a consideration, only because, I know some of our members have attended drug court graduations. I've had clients graduate there. It's a very positive thing, and I think, the hero and the heroin awareness. Whether some funds went to drug court and having some of the staff, go to some of these events, that's where I'd like to see the dollars, so that, there's a communication and a liaison between that awareness and drug court. So.
And let me just clarify, just years ago, we gave the award grant to drug court for the drug kits and things like that. Since that time, we passed, there was the state law that changed that has the drug court funding, so they don't really need these funds to do it. But obviously this is a drug court related type of thing. So some of the people who are suffering from heroin addictions are probably in the drug court program too. So there is a correlation. I'm not positive that they're part of the they're part of the team.
So long as Judge Pelican Road is always hitting us up for some money.
I did not say that they don't need more money. Everybody can always use money. But this is such a small amount of money, and it just works out that this program, which was proposed to do with Narcan, is a small amount of money. I failed to mention that the city of Joliet and the village of Bournemouth are very interested in getting this going for first responders, and we have an ongoing effort with the hospitals and others. First responders trained, that would be the only people who would get this drug to use as first responders, like police and fire.
Could I ask a question? Why do we have to have a public hearing for that?
It's part of the requirement for the grant. It's federal money.
Now, is that the county or the city of Joliet have to
Well, we're administering it. We've done it, but in the past, the city of Joliet and the county both have posted this on their website. It's all about transparency. So we put it out there for people to comment. We accept comments. Rarely do we get any comments.
Right.
It is important to let people know how to.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, we have about 30 seconds for public comments. I'm sorry, public, but I don't think there's anybody out there who wants to make comment anymore. Mr. Palmer.
And actually, real quick, Anastasia Tusky's here from our office. We are hosting a major heroin forum. She could just make a comment and hand out.
I have some posters and some flyers that I would love for you guys to take with you and pass out. It's going to be Saturday, May 17th, and we're partnering with DuPage Health Department. They're going to be addressing the Narcan distribution program, so this is going to be an excellent timing of this issue for us. So please take these. It's going to be a very big, we're having this in Romeoville at their new athletic center, and they're giving us a wonderful support, a lot of stuff. So we want to definitely make this a big thing. And if I could just really quick mention that our efforts are working, because in 2013 we did have a 30% reduction in the number of heroin overdose deaths. First time since 1999. So this is working. The education and the Narcan just could be another level that's going to increase those recovery rates, I think. So thank you all for supporting us.
Thank you. All right, entertain a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
All right, those in favor?
I vote on that.